Go.
All right, all right. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning. We had a little technical difficulty on the other end, so
Yeah,
we
we were
just
having problems hearing from the other end, but we are here. We are live. Welcome to the Soul Purpose Show. Excuse me. I'm your host Keith, and to my left is
hello everyone. It's Monica.
we're back in the Soul Purpose Studio. And ooh wee. Well, first of all, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in every Saturday at 11 o'clock. You can see us on our Facebook Live feed. You can see us on YouTube. But more importantly, you can hear us around the world on In Touch News Internet Radio, where everyone is a star. Um, I got to tell you, man, this show today is well. Happy Black History Month, first of all, everyone.
Yes.
But this show today is really special because, and I'm not going to wax on and on about Black History Month because I know that most of us for Black History Month, we hear kind of the same recurring themes, right? You got a daily kind of a Black history fact. You talk about people of historical importance, Black folks who have invented things and created things. And I'm not taking anything away from that. But we've been knowing the names Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and folks like that. We've been knowing those names since we were in grade school. Because
Yeah.
did you have to do your church program, Black History Month church programs? And
Yes,
school?
we did. We did. We actually had a pretty progressive. I grew up in a pretty progressive Baptist church, so we talked a lot about Black history, either local Black history facts or folks, and broader than just the traditional Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass. Yeah. We talked about people that we talked about Malcolm X. We talked about Fred Hampton and Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. So, and my family did too. So yeah, we did Black History Month presentations at church for sure.
So, so we've actually decided for February, we focused on a few other things. So we had a little bit of fun with our last few shows. We were in the Soul Purpose Kitchen. My lovely wife was cooking up some Super Bowl snacks.
Now, I firmly believe that the reason he did it was to show that his wife does cook and
Yes.
is type A personality as I am somewhat domesticated. So I think there was probably some underlying.
I've said that publicly. My wife is better than your wife. I mean, that's my position.
Well, I mean, you should say that.
And I've shown that, and I've proven that over the course of the past even several shows we've been in.
That is
Soul
true.
Purpose Kitchen, because you make everything happen.
I will say though that I didn't like your answer to this. One of our guests posted this on his Facebook page. I think Russell. So last week was Valentine's Day, mm-hmm. right? So I said on the show last week, I don't really do Valentine's Day. I've explained the reason why. My husband got me a gift, which I cannot share on air. He thought it was very funny. I thought it was just I chuckled. But Russell Wilson, who's the quarterback for the Seahawks, put an article. I mean, I guess he said that his greatest fear was losing his wife, Sierra. Mm-hmm. And Javonte said, if that's not your greatest fear, then you are not in the game, or whatever you said, Javonte. Mm-hmm. And I tagged you, and I didn't like your answer.
What was my answer?
I don't remember, but it wasn't that you were afraid of losing me. It was like you were afraid of losing certain parts of me. And into the gift that he got me that is funny internally, because Javonte got a gift. It's a cup that talks about some of my attributes in my husband's life.
So anyway,
before. That's completely off the topic, but since you brought it up, I just have to say I didn't like your answer, but go ahead.
My wife is better than your wife. Listen, Black History Month, right,
yes.
is full of characters and full of stories
yes.
that are deep, that are wide, that are all encompassing, and that are very complex and controversial at
Correct.
the same time, which is why I wanted to really do the show. There's a movie out that's that we're going to talk about, Judas the Black Messiah, that talks about the Black Panther Party. And the Black Panther Party is one of those things that we've all heard about. I don't think many of us have a background and really kind of more education and awareness around what they actually were. So we decided to bring in today someone who is not just a wealth of knowledge, but he's also family, right? Family bred. Really, he and his wife represent the best of what FAMU has produced, and really the best of Black love and Black relationships.
For sure.
And so we're going to welcome to our show our brother, Javonte.
Javonte Anyabwele, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He's an ongoing contributor to our show and what we're trying to accomplish with this show. Javonte, for those of us who have not seen you and who do not know you, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you and your wife actually do.
Yeah, so when I'm asked the question, who am I always like to state it as, I'm a race man. So similar to what like Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Garvey used to classify themselves as, is, everything that I do, whatever it is, I want it to be a contribution to our race. And so, that's the easiest way that I could say to define myself. But day job, corporate executive. My wife owns and runs a virtual private school now. Rise Anyabwele Academy is an Afrocentric private school that teaches babies pre-K through sixth grade. And more than anything, we are completely immersed in wanting to ensure that we know how wonderful our culture is, pass that on to the next generation, and ensure that what we are doing is about cultural preservation, more so than anything else. So that's it in a nutshell.
And I have to say, our son, there was a COVID outbreak at his school, and so he was out for 2 weeks. And I reached out to Talitha, and because I know she does a virtual school, as Javonte said. And when I tell you just the week and a half that Miles was in the school, my baby is walking around here singing "Lift Every Voice and Sing." He said that we watched the Super Bowl, and he asked if they were going to sing the anthem, and I said they're going to sing the Star Spangled Banner. He was like, no, they need to sing "Lift Every Voice and Sing." So in terms of just preparing, we do that. I mean, so Miles is fully aware of who he is, who we are, our contributions to not only this country but the world. But the fact that you all are reinforcing it, and Talitha's reinforcing it in our babies, and there's a sense of pride when you say, oh, I'm a Black, I can do Lift Every Voice and Sing, and I know who my ancestors are. The child's still talking about C.T. Vivian and who C.T. Vivian was. And so kudos to you all for so just that's a real life shout out to the things that you all are absolutely doing.
It was also interesting too, because he was whatever the course content that they were teaching during that period of time. I'm talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic. He was actually excelling, understanding that too. They have a teaching method that the little ones actually regurgitate what they're hearing.
And retain it.
And they're retaining it. Yeah, they're internalizing. So it was.
So as parents, kudos to Talitha, kudos to you all for doing what you all are doing at Rise Anyabwele Academy. I know that's not the topic, but I just had to give a shout out.
No, that is the topic. We're gonna talk. Yeah, we're gonna get into self-determination. But Javonte, you really are kind of like an encyclopedia of all things culture. Tell us how did this start for you? Like, how did it happen for you that you become like this? You really kind of are go-to all things, music, education, politics when it comes to the culture. Like, how did this start for you?
I grew up in it. I grew up in it, like completely immersed in all facets of it. Not only through the church, but in the church. I mean, my father was a member of Sounds of Blackness. So, that's my lens. I mean, my preschool was an Afrocentric preschool. My middle school was called Afrocentric Educational Academy. I grew up in it. But the love for it, I got it organically, and then also just the love for it. I mean, I love history of all kinds, all peoples across the world. So I retain a lot of information that I've heard, just because it's that. But every aspect of what culture that there is. I mean, it was my born name. I tell people this all the time. As I sit with my extra large red Solo cup during Black History Month, my born name was Javonte Anwar Adams. It was Black to begin with, so I just made it even blacker when I changed my last name to Anyabwele, but I was gonna be blackety black. That's how I was born into this world, so.
and for those of you who are not familiar, y'all young gents that have never heard Sounds of Blackness, Go like Spotify Sounds of Blackness. I'm telling you, the music was that music was groundbreaking in of itself, because you're listening to it. Oh, that's gospel music, but then you really listening to it. It was so uplifting. It was so empowering. To, just the messages behind that music. So even just growing up listening to that, obviously had to be very impactful.
So I think what sparked this, wanting to have this discussion, in addition to just it being Black History Month, was a movie came out. Was it this week, last week?
Yeah, it just came out.
Last Friday, I think. Last Friday, Thursday, or Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Judas and the Messiah.
The Black
Messiah. Which, full disclosure, I have not seen all of it. I saw the beginning and I saw the end. I fell asleep in the middle because my husband decided he wanted to start watching the movie at 9:00, and that's just a no-go for me. I'm not gonna make it. But so that sparked the interest, desire to do a show about the Black Panther Party, because I think on a whole, I don't know if many people know truly who the Black Panther Party was. I think they have some misperceptions based on what the media has shown or what people choose to share about certain individuals within the Black Panther Party. And obviously people, the FBI twists things about who the Black Panther Party were, but Keith thought it would be a good idea to have just a deeper conversation based, as the backdrop being the movie, about who the Black Panther Party was, why this particular movie and Fred Hampton specifically were so important, and why and how, and correct me if I'm wrong, how the Black Panther Party has basically been the foundation of the new movement of Black liberation and advocacy and Black Lives Matter that we see today. So nothing that these kids are doing is new.
Right.
It's just reborn. I think life is a cycle. So just reborn, marketed, and different name on it, but essentially kind of the same thing.
Yeah. So Javonte, so first of all, so the movie itself, right? So let's give a little bit about the backdrop of what this film is supposed to. It's based in reality, obviously. Not all of it is. There's some fictionalized liberties taken, but what is this? So what is this movie all about?
Yeah, so the movie is about a specific time and place in the history of the Black Panther Party, which is the Chicago chapter, and it's told through the lens of Wild Bill O'Neal, who was part of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, turned out to be an FBI informant. And the Black Panther Party in Chicago was so infamous because of its leader, Chairman Fred Hampton. And the reason Fred Hampton was so infamous is because of how he went about organizing in Chicago specifically. And so it tells the story through the lens of Bill O'Neal. And of course, you can't tell that story without highlighting everything about Fred Hampton, because that's who he was snitching on, basically. Yep. But the movie is a Black movie in the sense that it was written, directed, produced by Black folks. And I say that because it brings the humanity to everyone's story that was involved, right? And the pressures that we face. I think the most fascinating thing about the Panthers, and I mean, we'll talk about this maybe in a second, just sort of the historical context, but the Panthers were so effective in such a short period of time because they had all of the vigor and zeal that comes with fresh out of adolescence right into early manhood, womanhood that you have. If you go to college, that's college age. But if you're not, you just, you fresh out on the streets, and you're a fresh, young man, young woman. And that's really the age range that most of these cats were. So, the story had been told, and looking through the lens, I mean, you talk about, I grew up, I make my kids for punishment watch Eyes on the Prize like all the time. For me though, it was always a treat, a joy. Right. I was always trying to catch it on PBS or pop in the video VCR, pop in the videotape of it. My mom worked in public radio and public TV, so she was always having the new cuts of it or whatever. So. But we saw that later on, by the time Eyes on the Prize came out, 20 years removed from a lot of the let me say, the apex or pinnacle of what was happening with the party. In the 80s, these guys were now older, more sober, subdued, and not that youthful energy. So we sort of think of them, if you're that tail end of Gen X, you sort of think of them as older folks. But when they were doing all of the work or all of the dirt, they were 19, 20, 21 years old. And this film did a great job of showing, well, I think it did a great job of showing, if you caught it, that these were really young people doing some incredible things and making some very big, painful mistakes along the way. And that's really what it was. And it highlighted the Black Panther Party more holistically than what you usually hear about the Black Panther Party.
Right. So I was talking to Keith and Javonte about this before we got on the air. So the parts that I did see, I'm going to rewatch it. But the thing that struck me, the scene, I don't want to give it away, but I'm going to give it away because y'all can tune out for this particular part. But there's a scene in there because you talked about Fred Hampton's ability to organize. And he was 22 when he was murdered. 21 when he was murdered.
Yeah.
And which is super, young, extremely young. But the maturity and the insight he had in terms of how to organize to get the end result, to me, was something that I don't even think grown people really had, like really old people have. The most important scene to me was when he went to the Puerto Ricans, people that he typically would not get along with, or people would assume that he should not get along with or align with. He went to the Puerto Rican gang. He went to a Klan meeting and talked to them in language that they all understand. We are not each other's enemy. The enemy is XYZ.
The oppressor.
The oppressor.
Right.
Let's work together as a collective to address that issue. And I was sharing with Keith and Javonte that maybe it was an epiphany for me, or maybe not, but it seems to me, and if I'm wrong about this, and please give me your thoughts, that the oppressor attempts to continue the oppression by making the oppressed believe that the other is really the enemy. And that is the way that they're able to continue to do the things that they're doing. And anytime the oppressed people get together and figure out that really the oppressor is the issue and what they're trying to do, that's when the oppressor says, no, we're not going to do that. Who is the leader here? Let me go ahead and snuff them out. That's just my observation. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, historically, we've seen it play out over and over again. And we've seen it play out specifically in areas where I will, where the minority is really the minority, right? So we know that this country specifically is majority white. And we also know that in certain areas of the South, the majority of folks are Black. But in all of the northern, especially in the most urban cities, the minorities are really, really the minority. I mean, so you take a city like New York City, which has the most Black folks, of any city. 2 million Black folks live in New York City, and I mean, it's still like 25%, 30% Black. It's not a critical mass at all. You look at where the Panthers were started. California as a state has like 6% Black folks, 5% Black folks, And so when you talk about Black cities and Black areas, like Chicago, I think at its height was about 40% Black. Detroit is an exception because they talk about Detroit is turning white and it's still 75% Black.
Right.
At one point in time, Detroit, I grew up halfway in Detroit. If you saw a white person in the city limits of Detroit, it was like, what's happening? Something's going on, you could go days without, you feel like you were in Africa or something,
Right.
But most northern cities specifically, I'm highlighting that because we've seen this play out in different ways. We saw it play out, and you go as far back as David Walker in Boston, where he wrote, David Walker's Appeal. He specifically was talking about, what Black folks could do. He was an abolitionist. He was a freedman in the 1700s. He was mysteriously, disappeared. They still don't know what happened to him. He just disappeared.
Right.
But he wrote this book called David Walker's Appeal, and it's to the colored citizens of the world. Like, it's at one point in time, it was the longest book title in history. It still may be, but it's often just referred to as David Walker's Appeal. In there, he's talking mainly to Black folks, but he is also talking to poor folks about this system is also keeping you down, so you don't need to keep us down. And he was disappeared. There were times like that throughout history. If you saw the movie Free State of Jones, right? So there was this southern white man who was against the war, didn't want to fight it. Everyone in the South, especially poor white folks, were not necessarily against slavery ending because they couldn't get work, right? So in fact, if you research a lot of what they call the red shirts, which was like the great value, I call them the great value version of the Ku Klux Klan. They were specifically hot about Black folks. Now they're getting paid. So before they had a claim, well, I can be a blacksmith. You don't want to teach that slave how to be a blacksmith for all these other reasons, but when slavery ended, now these Black folks getting paid, and they getting paid for 25% of what the white folks, would make the poor white folks. And that was where the aggression started. In the northern places, you had the Irish, who were the poor working class. And if they were, in California, then they were pissed off at the Chinese. If they were in Boston or New York, they were pissed off at the Black folks or, the immigrants. And everywhere there were people around in these times who would say, look, if we just focus our energy not against each other, right, and we focus it on these other things, they usually ended up dead.
Yeah.
And so, how that was orchestrated, there's evidence and precedents, and then there's just like, oh, maybe it's ironic they just ended up dead. But there's definitely enough to say, yeah, that's usually what happens.
Yeah, it was, and I'm glad you brought that scene up. And frankly, if you have not seen the movie, you gotta watch the film. I mean, it's different. It's not the first film to ever be made to try a major motion picture to try to capture the stories of the Black Panthers. But this one's a little unique. It's a little different, and it's the first time you start to hear like Oscar and Golden Globe buzz because it was very, very well done. They had a wealth of talent that they put together, from the director and the producers to the two leads.
And I think the reason, I think Javonte hit on this, the reason it is so well done, and it shows humanity versus kind of feeding into the tropes that people have created about the Black Panther Party and its leaders. Yeah. There's a sense of humanity there because you really are you feel bad for Lakeith, but you're still angry because he was really put in a really tough position. I want my freedom. I didn't expect this to happen, but I'm still working. I mean, it's just all these different complexities to all the different characters. And then it showed the humanity of really what Fred Hampton was doing and what the purpose of the Black Panther was and what the ultimate goal was, which is to stop people being poor, stop police from beating up on people, poor people, Black people, whatever. Stop the cops from doing it. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, Lakeith, you mentioned Lakeith. Lakeith Stanfield plays the really kind of the lead character, which is Bill O'Neill. Wild Bill O'Neill was an FBI informant who had infiltrated the Black Panther Party. Daniel Kaluuya,
I think it's that's right.
Is the other lead, and he plays Fred Hampton. So listen, when we think about the Black Panther Party, what we see are these images of black leather jackets and afros and the black berets and really most notably young brothers and sisters openly carrying firearms, and so that's the imagery that you see. So my question is, is that imagery, was that random? Was it just because those were the only pictures that were taken, or was that like an intentional thing on their part?
So it was all of the above. So it was intentional. So the Black Panther Party started in '66, and they started, they were groups before. So in California, there was this Black intelligentsia that was developing, where, people know Huey P. Newton, and they think of the brother in the chair with the spear and the rifle. but they often forget that was Dr. Huey P. Newton. You know, he was an academic at the end of the day. He was this high, functioning, intelligent guy. Bobby Seale was in school to be a lawyer, and they used to run with all these cats. They were in Northern Cal, and then in Southern Cal, you had Maulana Karenga, Ron Karenga, Dr. Maulana Karenga, who created Kwanzaa. And they all had these different ideas on, what comes next, because they were children during the civil rights movement. And now that as they were moving into, adulthood, they were like, this activism can't stop because they snuffed out Malcolm. And a lot of his teachings, resonated in the urban areas more so than King, because the aggression was a different type of aggression. So you really had to focus Black folks and be concerted in keeping them in their place. And it was often done so with police, right? So what I mean by that is in the North, Black folks got to the North and out West because of the opportunities to work in jobs. But just like all these minority groups, just like they treat the immigrants now, Mexico, they just want you to do that. But as soon as you do that, we need you to go home. We don't need you sprawling out. We don't need you spreading out. And if you look at the context of it, what occurred, Field Secretary NAACP in 1923 termed 1919, 1920 Red Summer, because, and actually it was a period from 1917 to 1923 where over 2,000 Black folks were either killed by police or lynched by mobs. And a lot of this, this was not the lynching that was occurring in the South. This was happening in more of these urban, northern, western cities. And it was happening, usually those conflicts, different than the ones in the South, which were tied to somebody trying to, there was a nucleus of empowerment there. Some white person was trying to steal a business from a Black person or something like that. What you had in these northern cities was simply, no, y'all don't move too far next to us. Y'all are not about to be our neighbors, so you're gonna die. So, and die horrible deaths to teach everybody to stay in your ghettos. And we're going to police your ghettos. And so that was the frame. But I said the field secretary. It was James Weldon Johnson, who was the field secretary, the author of Lift Every Voice is Seen.
And one of the first Black lawyer to be admitted to the Florida bar. So just
So what the Panthers were intentional about how they started with the guns as a show of force was actually before any incidents happened, and how they showed up on the scene was a year after Malcolm was killed. Betty Shabazz was out there speaking because she had to raise money to take care of 6 kids. Yeah. And so she was going to California to speak in the university circuit. And so the guys who were in Northern Cali she was being passed over from the guys who were in Southern Cali, which was Ron Karenga and the group called Us. And they were like, they were talking about, we need to, kill the pigs and all this stuff, but they didn't have no guns and really was just talking. And the brothers from Northern Cali was like, nah, forget that. We gonna have these guns, we showing up. And so they had a conflict. So they showed up to show, nah, we got you, Sister Betty. And they were photographed then by news, and word started to spread like, oh, I want to join this group. The group hadn't really formed yet. So what happened was a couple of years later, they had formed. There were several incidents of police brutality, and specifically Lil Bobby Hutton was killed. He was 18. Lil Bobby Hutton was 18 and was a member of the Black Panther Party, and he was killed by police. At that time, they talked about being armed and showing, but they weren't walking around, arming themselves. So at that point in time, it became a lot more personal, and they started walking around with the guns because they wanted their numbers to grow. And this is sort of how they, that was intentional. They also, because they were academics, they knew how to use press. And that's really important. And that's how it spread so rampant in these places where they knew how to use the press to say, all publicity is good publicity. And the fact that they're like 19, 20, 21 years old, they're not really thinking of the foresight of, now they may drop a bomb on us like what Reagan did later on, you know, but that's sort of how it came to show. But that was not the first step of the formation of the Black Panthers. That wasn't what they were about, but it was definitely what they said, okay, we're gonna ride with this. You know, almost how Pac was like, okay, I'm gonna ride with this persona of a thug, even though he was a child of Black Panthers, you know.
Right.
No, I wanted you touched on something. I want to get into some of the more kind of the positive things that we don't talk as much about that the Black Panthers were involved in. But you have hit on something that I want to explore a little bit more and a little bit deeper, and that is the relationship between the laws in California at that time, which was the open carry. It was illegal to carry weapons, to what happened shortly after that, because Reagan was actually elected governor, and started doing some things and gaining support for actually changing some of the laws in reaction to
the Black Panther Party,
to the Black Panther.
Yeah. So Reagan ain't never came up with a good idea a day in his life. So, you know,
you shame the devil, Javonte.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he was Trump before Trump, you know, and it was never, you know, his brain trust wasn't that. But what was happening was, with the Black Panthers, they were on Front Street about it. But what was really going on was there was this development happening in Southern California with these gangs forming who had guns. And in fact, Bunchy Carter, John Higgins, they were the leaders of the Los Angeles Black Panther Party, and they were connecting with the Black P Stones. The Black P Stones was the gang, actually, they called them the Crowns in the movie in Chicago, but the Black Stones, Jeff Fort, later turned into El Rook and ended up getting millions of dollars from Libya. Like these guys, I mean, it gets deep. The connections, Gaddafi was giving money to a gang in Chicago, you know.
Don't you tell it.
Yeah, so Jeff Fort, who started the Black P Stone Rangers in Chicago, they went out and started a gang in California that became the Bloods. So the Bloods originated from a gang in Chicago. But these gangs were carrying guns, and initially they were doing the work and the bidding of community policing. And so before any drugs, before anything, that now just similar to mafia and everything else, is like, you pay us and we gonna make sure you protect it. You know, the police would run up, you got a business, oh, who you think you is, you uppity nigger, and bust your head and bust your building up and all of these things. And what Bunchy Carter was able to do was say, look, we can do this more on a national level, and we can formalize this on a national level. So that can be one of the tenets of what we say. So the district attorney, I forget the district attorney's name for California, but he was the one who was really pressing for the legislator in California to change the rules about open carry, because these Black folks were arming themselves in California, who had always been not just oppressed, but terrorized by the police, and it wasn't working anymore. It wasn't working in SoCal, and it wasn't working in NoCal either. And so what happened was that, they lobbied and they legislated. Initially, they had pushback from National Rifle Association, because the National Rifle Association was like, nah, this is what we want. You know? And then they were like, well, did you know they were all Black? They were like, well, since the National Rifle Association doubled the KKK, they was like, well, that's something to think about. So maybe, okay, well, we're gonna lobby, let's put the gun control laws, because what we don't want is then you start to hear this talk about, we gotta defend the Second Amendment. So as long as it's a legal firearm, as long as you legally got it, as long as now you have to have a license required. And by the way, you can't have an open carry in a federal building, in a state building, and all of these rules that came into play. And that's how they ended up targeting the Panthers, because there were a lot of displays, especially after folks, because they killed the police. The COINTELPRO actually killed Bunchy Carter. Okay, Bunchy Carter was the leader of the Los Angeles Black Panther Party, and John Higgins They were the Huey Newton and Bobby Seals of Los Angeles. They killed them about 6 months or 8 months before they killed Fred Hampton. You know, so these assassinations were happening everywhere, and they were doing it with the main leaders who were able to say, okay, we're going to take all of the discarded folks, right? And we're going to organize you in a way that's going to bring purpose. So if your machismo is, I'm a gang leader and I need to have a strap and that's how we're going to use that. We're going to use that because we do need, you know, defense for our neighborhoods and protecting that. So, you know, they changed the law specifically on that. And Reagan was the one to absolutely take credit for it. And to show a force of hand later on, I think it was 69 or maybe it was 70, he ordered the bombing of the national headquarters of the Black Panther Party, and cited, you know, the reasons for doing so. The raid that needed to happen was because they were breaking all these laws, these gun laws. Yeah.
Oof. Listen, look, I said, get Javonte. If Javonte's available, get him on, because he'll drop seeds of wisdom. I'll be like, dang, really? Okay, for real?
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that so there was a Time article that you sent, and I read the Time article, read some other things in preparation for today. And the thing that's so interesting to me is the similarities between what the activists now, Black Lives Matter activists are asking for now, and what the Black Panthers were asking for and what they demanded. And the very top of the list, at least on the Time magazine, was policing the police. Policing the police. And one of the things they did in the movie is there's a scene where a guy sees some cops bothering some folks in the store. They're just in the store and they're in there roughing them up, harassing them. And the brother walks in and says, you know, what are you doing? Why are you bothering these people? And the cops and him get into an altercation and they end up shooting them. Black Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter activists and the kids and these young people now are doing the exact same thing, except now we have cameras. But in terms of they were also Black Panther was also calling for this whole abolition of jail system, abolition of the concept of the police, and moving more towards community policing. And they have, I put it out, where'd it go? They had a 10-point, the 10-point program and 10-point plan. I had it. And if people, I would recommend that folks print out that 10-point plan and read it and see what you disagree with on the 10-point plan. There's nothing that and the thing that's interesting to me is it says consistently Black and oppressed people. The and to me is intentional and purposeful, because that and provision, I think, is what the ultimate issue and challenge was for white folks who were trying to keep them down.
Well, and before we go into the aspect of the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think there are several parallels there, but you know, the Panthers were so progressive because they were a break away from everything that we looked at as respectability, even amongst our community. Right. So this wasn't, you know, the Nation of Islam that was saying we're going to take the most corrupted, downtrodden, and then make men out of them and make women out of them. And so there's going to be this respectfulness that we always come with. There wasn't the Black bourgeoisie that was specifically the Southern Church, and really it was the Black Baptist Church and the AME. That's true. Because the Kojics was off, you know, shouting. Oh, that's right. You know, so but they were it wasn't that group either. These were the kids who were they were in college, not at HBCUs. Right. And so and it came out of Northern California, right, which is, you know, a hotspot for all things super left and liberal. Yeah. So the Panthers weren't just about, you know, we need to self-defend. They were about women were equal, you know, to a certain extent. Let me say that there absolutely was all the misogyny and misogynoir that was going on. Elaine Brown talks about that a whole lot. But Elaine Brown was the literal leader of the Black Panther Party for like 3 years. This was a Black woman, you know. But you know, I don't think it's really well known that WIC was created under Nixon for And it was birthed out of the free breakfast program.
Yeah.
So what they saw, you know, the free breakfast program was so successful because the Panthers was feeding black babies, but they were feeding they were feeding all folks who lived around there. A child could come get free breakfast, no questions asked, nothing. And the government was like, man, they're so loved. So you know, the fight, any fight it's on all sides with the government. They're gonna get you in the media. You know, my grandma used to say they're gonna get you coming and going, right? Yep. So they were like, well, we can't just take them out. Before we take them out, we're gonna have to replace some of the good that they're doing. So, you know, women, infant, and children was created based on a lot of what's in the 10-point plan by the Black Panther Party. So you talk about the good that they did, and not only did a group like Black Lives Matter, you know, remix, bite, copy the Black Panther Party, but so did the federal U.S. government.
Yeah.
You know? And so, you know, that was there. That was super progressive, like just ensuring that kids had something to eat before they went to school.
Yeah.
I have to. We got to dedicate a few minutes to talk about capitalism versus socialism, because I think you even heard it in the movie, and they were talking, and they made some allusions to, you know, it's the fact that the capitalist system is working to keep us down.
Yeah.
And so they kind of toyed with the whole concept of socialism in the movie. And what we know now today is we can talk about, you know, Black Panther, we can talk about self-determination, we can talk about weapons and guns and Second Amendment. You talk about the S word in today's contemporary political ideology, and it is the
boogeyman.
So give us some perspective on economic empowerment and specifically socialism with respect to the party.
So it's funny because you know, I've lived in a lot of different places and traveled even more, and, you know, for work. So and let me start it this way. Everyone, well, not everyone, but there was known strife between Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seals. Mm-hmm. And everyone says like, oh, they wanted to lead it in a different way and all these different things. They were making appointments like Eldridge Cleaver, who I cannot stand, by the way, just want to put it out there. He's always been a sucker MC to me. He's like, you know, he's a punk, but, you know, whatever. He garnered them more popularity, but, you know, Huey was definitely close to Eldridge. Bobby Seals, like, something ain't right with him, and he was right, but that was not their biggest issue. Their biggest issue was Huey was saying socialism, and Bobby was saying, I don't care if it's socialism or capitalism, we need money.
Yeah.
However we get it. And so I say that because, you know, the United Kingdom, which is the inventor of capitalism, is a socialist country. I lived in the Netherlands, and it's a socialist country. Okay, I've traveled extensively in the Middle East. Every one of those countries are socialist countries. You know, so the idea, they've McCarthy'd the word socialism in the United States, because it's very easy to demonize and scapegoat anything for the majority, because, you know, the majority of conservatives and right wing are like hugely uneducated folks. You know, and so you ain't, oh, if this is the dirty word, this is the bad word. So depending on when time it is, then okay, so that's what it's going to be. And today is socialism, right? So the ideas of socialism are not like super rocket science, but what America views socialism as, it's the gateway drug to communism. Okay, that's what America views socialism as. That's why it's like, oh, you want to be a socialist, but our neighbors are socialists. Like, you know, the countries with, when I say our neighbors, our near neighbor to the north, Canada is a socialist country, right? So the concept of, you know, even in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, if a woman gets pregnant, okay, no matter what, she is going to get an allowance for the government to take care of that child. The United Arab Emirates got this idea not from Saudi Arabia, who does the same thing, not from all these other, they got it from Sweden, because Sweden does the same thing, right? So this idea of a universal basic income to like care for the child. Why? Because all the studies have been shown, like if you don't care for them now, they're gonna cost you more later.
Correct.
So you just give these people like this little bit of money a month, and they can take care of their kids, and so they don't end up like being a degenerate in our society. America doesn't like to connect the dots that way, right? Because they're holding up this whole propaganda about we got to make sure we don't become communists, right? So socialism today, I don't really know if we even, and when it's thrown around, when I hear folks talk about it, they talk about like, oh, capitalism won't exist. Like, nah, that ain't what it is. It's just really, you're just going to these specific taxes instead of 54% of your discretionary budget going to the military, it's going to go to more programs. That's really what's. I just walk in and
I just came to support people.
you came to support. You just walked in on the camera. Everybody saw you. What are you talking about? Oh, see, that's why I was laughing so hard at y'all earlier, because this is the same thing over here.
COVID reality. Hey, Tony. So listen, this is a COVID reality.
She trying to go over there like she looking for something. Ain't nothing over there. Oh man. Anyway, but
sole purpose exclusive.
Listen.
But the programs like free breakfast and all of this was the viewpoint of saying, you know, we have to create. So back to the self-determination idea, and this socialist view is we've got to take care of our own, because it's not going to happen, you know, waiting for the government to do it. And so oftentimes socialism now and then within the Black Panther Party was talked about in a way that was really anti-fascism. And fascism shows up no matter what, you know, what overall marketplace dynamic that you have, whether it's socialism, capitalism, communism, you can have a fascist. We just had one.
Yep.
You know, so in a capitalistic environment, he wasn't the first.
Yeah.
You know, so that can exist. And so, you know, people, when you talk socialism, and when Huey was talking about socialism, he was really talking about we've got to provide, we've got to commune, we've got to provide for these communities. And so policing it, feeding the kids, all of these things were, from his viewpoint, were socialist ideas that weren't being done because, you know, we were the underbelly, and really still are, especially in these more urban and northern places where the Panther Party had a foothold. We're the underbelly of all of these things.
And if you read, that's why I'm encouraging people to read this 10-point program, because what Javonte, they're talking about healthcare, they're talking about education, they're talking about feeding kids, they're talking about building community, ensuring that folks aren't living in poverty. They're ensuring that people have a real livable wage. Like, people should not work every day 40 hours a week and still can't pay their bills and still can't eat. So that's what I mean. Go ahead.
When I lived in the Netherlands, they everything was closed on Sundays. The whole country closed on Sundays. And when I say everything, I mean your groceries. If you didn't have your groceries, you weren't getting them on Sunday. Like, everything was closed. This was government mandated. All of the stores closed during the weekday at like 5 or 6 o'clock. So even the stores you go to in the towns, you could not be like, oh, I'm gonna just go run, I'll get some at 8 o'clock. It's not open. And then one day a week, now it depended on the municipality that you lived in, but one day a week, they would have the store stay open till like 9 p.m. So in the town that I lived in, it was Thursdays. So Thursdays, the stores would stay open at 9 p.m. if you need to get something during the week. But the stores had like regular hours. Why? Because as a socialist country, they said it's important for people to spend time with their families. You're going to have less sick people. Parents can catch diseases quicker in their children if they see them more. We don't need you working that much. Anything that's not happening, we will supplement. Okay, so that's a socialist country. But nobody thinks about KLM Airlines or Shell, the Dutch oil company, as a socialist country, right? You know, and, you know, they were one of the biggest, I mean, we won't go that far back, but they were one of the biggest purveyors of the actual slave trade moving. So they created the banking system. I mean, you know, New York used to be called New Amsterdam. Wall Street was actually from a man from, you know, the Netherlands, all that stuff, which is, again, capitalistic ideas, but it's a socialist country and always has been, you know.
But to me, it makes sense. It makes sense if you take care and allow people to take care of themselves, you end up with folks healthier, you end up with less crime, because all these countries you're talking about, if you look at in terms of the crime rates in those countries, they pale in comparison to what's going on here. So people are robbing people and doing the things that they're doing because they're hungry. Some of it is really out of desperation, not because I really just want to go stick up the bank or hold up the bank or stick up this person or take this lady purse. I'm hungry. I need to feed my children. I need to do something to, it's kind of self-preservation. So, I mean, I've read it before, but hadn't read it in detail. I mean, I had heard about the 10-point program, but hadn't read it in detail, but I printed it this morning and was reading it. I was like, this is all the stuff that people are saying all the time, that it's not new. It's very logical. It makes sense. And reparations is on here too.
Oh, absolutely. So here's the thing, and taking it back to Black Lives Matter. When Black Lives Matter started, one of the biggest knocks on Black Lives Matter was, well, what do they want?
Right.
And these women, being Black women, were being Black women like, we ain't talking to y'all because we done already told you what we wanted. We done already said what we wanted for 50 years. Yep. And it ain't changed. So when they finally said, okay, this is what we want, that's why it almost looks identical to the 10-point plan. And the 10-point plan was pulled from tenets of King's last book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here, and Malcolm X's autobiography. Yep. They both will tell you that, like, they just put those things together. And so in Chaos and Community, Where Do We Go From Here, King is specifically and consistently talking about the three evils of society, which is racism, militarism, and what's the other one? I forget. It was like I forget off the top of my head right now, but it was something that had to do with economics, right? So and so I think he may have said capitalism. Yeah, racism. He said racism, militarism, and capitalism in the context of poverty. And so those things were feeders for, okay, what do we want out of these 10-point plans? And so King was calling for reparations. That's why you see it in the 10-point plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Malcolm was saying we want human rights, and if you don't give them to us, we are shooting back.
Yeah.
That's why you see that in the 10-point plan. Healthcare, all of these things that we've been talking about. That's why Black Lives Matter. For whatever it's worth. That's why, like, we ain't saying nothing new.
This is nothing.
Doing the same thing. So.
Yeah.
I think it's a good tie-in to, and I use the term anti-racism now very deliberately because we have been in the diversity and inclusion space for many years.
Pause. Diversity inclusion is a nothing burger. I need people to stop using it because they don't really mean anything when they say it. And I'm on the inclusion committee. It's something, but they're not doing it.
It's for white women.
It's for white women to feel good about themselves and say whatever.
Continuation of the 19th.
Correct. Correct. Sorry.
Diversity and inclusion has been around for many years. The term anti-racism is a more deliberate term that speaks to the kind of the systemic and the institutionalized aspects of what oppression, of how oppression manifests itself. And so that's the reason why I use that term as I do, because when you can take the last 50 years since the passage of civil rights legislation, and you can take that and go from what was happening in 1965 to today,
and the same things happening,
and you don't see any real market improvement in any of the indicators from what people were marching in the streets, either in the South, marching in the streets up north when they were burning down cities in retaliation to the riots, and then carrying rifles and guns and whatnot on the West Coast. We talk about Black Panther Party. When you see that's what they were doing then, and today
you're still doing the same thing.
People are like, we've tried everything
because it is institutionalized. We talked about this. You and I talked about this last night with our friends. Until you take a scalpel and you cut out the cancer, you're just putting a Band-Aid over it. It is institutional. You have to blow up these institutions, and they have to be willing to change the whole infrastructure behind that. And they're not gonna do that. They're not gonna do that.
And that's where the terms people like it or not, defund and disband police come from, because they're saying, the biggest threat is always the alligator closest to the boat.
Correct.
And for poor folks that live in wherever they live, the overseer is still there. KRS One said the sound of the police, sound of the beast, officer, overseer.
Right.
So it's but what he was saying was simply that, okay, you're still there to make my life hell.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do anything. I can't walk down the street. I can't sit out in front of my car. Whatever I was doing, I can't do those things without, the nature of this threat. And so why are you even there? You don't live there, right? And so that's where this whole thing of police and the police came from, was like, you could have community policing. There are folks that, in fact, there's not even it's a foreign concept in inner cities, but in suburbs, it's community policing all day.
For sure.
It'd be the neighbor, you see him at the grocery store, and then your neighbor, oh, that's the policeman. Oh, hey, I know that kid. He ain't gonna be, all of these things. But the framework of it, has to be completely redone. And that's why folks are saying we got to disband the police, because you do need other resources there. And, I saw something like Chicago got all of this COVID relief from the federal government. 60% of it went to the police force for whatever reasons. But I guarantee you that's going to turn into surplus of weapons.
Yep.
Those weapons are going to use to kill more Black folks.
Right. And if you talk to cops will tell you, like, if they're honest, if you have a sit-down conversation with cops who are willing to be honest, they will tell you that their role is not to go handle a mental health crisis. No. They would prefer that those funds use them for really helping people, because 90% of the calls, this is a conversation I had, 90% of the calls that come into a police dispatch are for mental health issues. It's not crime. It's not violent crime or domestic abuse stuff, but it's not violent crime, which cops are there to assist and help eliminate. It's mental health or domestic violence issues that somebody else can handle.
I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, from Minneapolis was Ferguson of 2020 and so on and so forth. Very, very good friend of mine, grew up together. He's been featured in New York Times, Real Sports. He's the coach of the neighborhood high school we went to, the team we played on, head coach of the football team. He was a police officer. He's no longer a police officer. And he was a police officer because his daddy was a police officer and his granddaddy was a police officer before them in the neighborhood that we grew up in. But he said something to me. He's like, we are never called to solve a crime. Mm-hmm. That's not what we there. We never stop them.
Yeah.
Yep. He said, and my brother is a firefighter in Minneapolis, and he talked about, they don't have to have guns to de-escalate situations. That firefighters are the first responders. They usually show up first, when it's not a violent call, but somebody's tripping, somebody's on drugs, somebody done passed out. That's usually a firefighter who's showing up first with no guns and it's handled. And they're more courageous because they're running into fires, all of these things, and they don't kill anybody.
Yeah.
No, I'm just gonna say I was just gonna put a bow on our conversation today, because I know we're out of time. Listen, this has been truly insightful, brother. We appreciate you always coming on and helping us navigate these very, very tough subjects. For our listening audience, thank you for tuning in to the Soul Purpose Show. We got much more coming up next week. We're gonna cap off our Black History Month the way Black History Month needs to be capped off on. So,
all right.
Much love to you.
Thank y'all. See y'all later.